is interesting also about the Kolbrin Bible is that it's one of the only books I've ever found that has a vivid description of what took place in the first destruction, the destruction of the First World Age. But we're going to go into that. But I want to give my co-hosts, Alan Swanson and Kevin Unterberger, a chance to give a shout-out. Kevin, you want to sound off?
Sure. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Once again, I'm blessed to be here with Brother Alan and Brother Zen for another exciting show. And I was looking forward to hearing your thoughts on the Kolbrin Bible. While I have never had the opportunity to read it, I trust your discernment, Zen, and Brother Alan's. And while the portion of the show that really tweaked my interest was the thoughts upon Nibiru or Rahab, or as some might call it, Planet X, or wormwood that they correlate it to in the scriptures. And while my views differ from I suspect from yours and Brother Allen's as far as the reality of this particular planet, I in jest before we came onto the show said, well, I'm probably going to be the one that plays devil's advocate. What I should have said is I probably am going to be the one that plays God's advocate as far as the concerning the existence of this planet X, this Nibiru, this Rahab, this wormwood that is spoken of in the scriptures. The scriptures speak of it as wormwood, and I will make my viewpoint known on the show. So I might be in opposition to maybe possibly what you folks, you and Alan, might believe or have come to glean knowledge upon. But that doesn't mean, and that's what this show is all about, I think, folks, is different perspectives. But as far as Planet Nibiru goes, as we get into the show, I'll make my stance known to all of you, and we'll let the listeners decide, where the truth leads them. It's all in the process of us seeking the truth, and I love doing it with you guys, and I think that it's going to be an interesting topic here.
Yeah, but just know that I'm not trying to debate whether this planet is in existence or not. I'm just reading what the Kolbrin Bible says. So.
Oh, I know.
But anyways, Alan, do you want to give a shout out?
Yeah. Good afternoon, Fallen Angels TV, weighing and sharpening slaughter prophetic revelations that are, in my opinion, soon to befall the earth. There's nothing I'd rather be doing. Blessed to be here.
Yeah. So. I want to, for those that haven't had a chance to even look at this particular book, it's incredible amount of work put together, and it covers like Genesis to Revelation, it covers from the beginning all the way to the end. But so I'm gonna go into this. Let me hold on one second. I've got to reopen the book. Hold on. It's going to take me just a second. Hey, Alan, have you read some of this, right? Why don't you comment a little bit while I open this document about what you think you read?
Okay, well, Zen had pulled out about 5 chapters from this book. I would say it would be on paper, say maybe about 15 pages maximum. This is a breakdown of the day of the Lord. You have a ridiculous, tight, highly prophetically crammed full of parallels to what is known in the Word as the day of the Lord, what occurs at the inception of the 6 seals. You've got things, I just broke down 30 points here quickly that I'll just look right through, that I pulled out from probably about 60 sentences. It speaks of a great red dragon. This is Revelation 12, descending with a tail. Also, Revelation 12, the thundering, lightning, a darkening of the sky, cinders, fires, and stones falling. That's at the first trump. Oceans pouring out of land. That's also in the prophets. You got a burning of men by fire. This is a primary facet of the end times. It's the form that the judgment comes in to eradicate the sinners from the earth. unrepentant. You've got a tearing open of the earth. You've got a red dust forming in the atmosphere, a crashing of rocks to the earth, a few survivors, men hiding in mountains, terror, earthquakes, earth being moved from its very foundations. This is the pole shift in Isaiah 24. You've got a drastic alteration of landscape, mighty winds, soars upon men. It speaks of its mouth actually being an abyss. You've got hail falling to the earth, the destruction of the trees, melting of mountains, also a very specific terminology to the day of the Lord in the prophets. The bloodying of waters, a vile contamination of the waters, destruction of all the grass, great swarms of locusts. You've got a total blackness, a destruction of ships, and another one, the earth spewing up the dead and the embalmed being revealed to all, a halting of the grinds and a great moral degeneracy. I mean, I could have even kept going with that, and then I pulled that out of literally like about 40 or 50 sentences of a prophetic chapter in this book. So basically, what I've read in this book is it's the day of the Lord, but it explains the physics or a possibility of the physics behind it as being this great planet passing, and it also parallels implicitly the Exodus judgment. What happened there? So I'm not saying it's divinely inspired, but it is extremely interesting. And the more that I look at the incursion prophecies and the physics behind the judgments, of the final days, it really seems to be the only viable answer. It seems to be sort of something that's mentioned in the Word a lot without specifically referring it to it as a planet, aside from once in Isaiah 13.
Kev, I'm going to give you a moment to comment here because I'm still having problems with this particular document, and I apologize.
That's not a problem, Brother Z. Folks, when it comes to the question of this planet Exodus and Nibiru, I think it's incumbent upon people to remember where the word Nibiru came from. It comes from the Sumerian cuneiform stone tablets and writings that are probably 6,000 years old, and the term Nibiru means planet of the crossing. And as far as the Sumerian culture is concerned, I guess you could say it was the first recorded civilization on Earth after a flood, then called Sumerian, which is in today's Iraq. But when it comes to how people are tying this planet as far as to wormwood in the scriptures, I was very interested by it and all the hype that's on the internet about it. But in the revelation of Christ given to John, we find that most intriguing prophecy often used to suggest that some kind of heavenly body will crash into the earth and do great damage. The prophecy describes this as a great star named wormwood, and when we examine this concept in light of biblical support, and I'll read Revelation 8 verses 10 and 11 real quick. And a third angel sounded, and there fell a great star from heaven, burning as it were a lamp. And it fell upon the third part of the rivers, and upon the fountains of waters. And the name of the star is called wormwood. And many died of the waters because they were made bitter. So we see in that article, in that scripture, we primarily use scripture here in strict adherence to biblical animation that the Bible should interpret itself. And I think our challenge is in understanding John's vision and defining what these terms and images mean. If we were to ascribe purely to the literal physical meaning of these, then we accept that a huge star burning brightly will crash into our planet, but somehow the earth will not be destroyed. It will mysteriously manage to fall on only the rivers and aquifers, fully 1/3 of them, which are scattered widely, across the globe. And no one will die from what would be a cataclysmic impact, but rather from the water which is poisoned and made bitter from the star. So now when you consider the physical interpretation of these things, we are confronted with events which violate the laws of our Creator God has set in motion in the universe. If we, on the other hand, cling to the strictly literal interpretation, but then justify our position by suggesting that God will violate his own laws to miraculously bring forth this to fulfillment, then aren't we departing from the literal physical understanding anyway and taking that position, I think. It's clear that it would violate the principle of biblical integrity and the consistency upon which the soundness of the Scripture is based.
How
I think
how does it violate the integrity?
I think because it's an important and powerful message Christ has given to John, and when you search the Scriptures,
I'm talking about the planet.
Because if a planet was to impact the Earth, Brother Z and Brother Allen, it would destroy our planet. We know that.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean? And God never said that He was going to destroy our planet. And
right.
So I think it plays into, and I'm here again, it plays into that 90-10 part of 90% truth and 10% lie that we see Hollywood portraying, that there's going to be this rogue planet or asteroid hitting the Earth, and you see movies made about this to really to scare us and to and I think that the Illuminati, because they worship a different God, they kind of believe this, and that's why they build these great underground bases to hide in, and the Scriptures tell us about it.
And let me interject here for just a second,
yep.
Kevin. As far as the planet Nibiru, I never said that this planet was ever going to impact the Earth.
Oh,
and
I know that.
Never, And also, as far as this Kolbrin Bible, which thank God I was able to retain the document, and we're going to go into it now. The Kolbrin Bible doesn't describe this called the destroyer, and I'm not even saying that it's Niburu. All I'm saying is that something is described, and I'm not saying it's wormwood either, but something in the Kolbrin Bible, hold on. Something in the Kolbrin Bible is described as the destroyer, and it talks about it coming close to the Earth and crossing the sky, but it doesn't say that it impacts it. But we're going to go ahead we're going to go ahead and go into this because we got an hour remaining, and I need to cover a lot of territory. So this is from the destruction and the recreation. This is the Kolbrin Bible. It is known, and the story comes down from ancient times, that there was not one creation but two, a creation and a recreation. It is a fact known to the wise that the earth was utterly destroyed once and then reborn on a second wheel of creation. At the time of the great destruction of earth, God caused a dragon from out of heaven to come and encompass her about. The dragon was frightful to behold. It lashed its tail. It breathed out fire and hot coals, and a great catastrophe was inflicted upon mankind. The body of the dragon was wreathed in a cold, bright light, and beneath on the belly was a ruddy, hued glow, while behind it trailed a flowing tail of smoke, and it spewed out cinders and hot stones, and its breath was foul and stenchful, poisoning the nostrils of men. Its passages caused great thunderings and lightnings to rend the thick, darkened sky, all heaven and earth being made hot. The seas were loosed from their cradles and rose up, pouring across the land. There was an awful shrilling, trumpeting, which outpowered even the howling of the unleashed winds. Men, stricken with terror, went mad at the awful sight in the heavens. They were loosed from their senses and dashed about, crazed, not knowing what they did. The breath was sucked from their bodies, and they were burnt with a strange ash. And then it passed, leaving earth enwrapped within a dark and glowing mantle, which was ruddily lit up inside. The bowels of the earth were torn open in great rising upheavals, and a howling whirlwind rent the mountains apart. The wrath of the sky monster was loosed in the heavens. It lashed about in flaming fury, roaring like 1,000 thunders. It poured down fiery destruction amid a welter of thick black blood. So awesome was the fearfully aspected thing that the memory mercifully departed from man. His thoughts were smothered under a cloud of forgetfulness. The earth vomited forth great gusts of foul breath from awful mouths opening up in the midst of the land. The evil breath bit at the throat before it drove men mad and killed them. Those who did not die in this manner were smothered under a cloud of red dust and ashes, or were swallowed by the yawning mouths of earth, or crushed beneath crashing rocks. The first sky monster was joined by another, which swallowed the tail of the one going before, but the two could not be seen at once. This monster reigned and raged above earth, doing battle to possess it. But the many-bladed sword of God cut them into pieces, and their falling bodies enlarged the land and the seas. In this manner, the first earth was destroyed by calamity, descending from out of the skies. The vaults of heaven had opened to bring forth monsters, more fearsome than any that had ever haunted the uneasy dreams of men. Men and their dwelling places were gone. Only sky boulders and red earth remained, where once there were, but amidst all the desolation, a few survived. For man is not easily destroyed. They crept out from caves and came down from the mountainsides. Their eyes were wild and their limbs trembled. Their bodies shook and their tongues lacked control. Their faces were twisted and the skin hung loose on their bodies. They were as maddened wild beasts driven into an enclosure before flames. They knew no law, being deprived of all the wisdom they once had. And those who had guided them were gone. The earth, only true altar of God, had offered up a sacrifice of life and sorrow to atone for the sins of mankind. Man had not sinned in deed, but in things he had failed to do. Man suffers only for what he does, but for what he fails to do. He is not chastised for making mistakes, but failing to rectify and recognize them. The great canopy of dust and cloud, which encompassed earth, enshrouding it in heavy darkness, was pierced by ruddy light, and the canopy swept down in great cloudbursts and raging storm waters. Cool moon tears were shed for the distress of the earth and the woes of men. When the light of the sun pierced the earth, piercing its shroud, bathing the land in revitalizing glory, the earth again knew night and day, for there was now times of light and times of darkness. The smothering canopy rolled away, and the vaults of heaven became visible again to man. The foul air was purified, and new air clothed the reborn earth, shielding her from the dark, hostile void of heaven. The rainstorms ceased to beat upon the faces of the land, and waters stilled their turmoil. Earthquakes no longer tore the earth open, nor was it burned and buried by hot rocks. The land masses were reestablished in stability and solidity, standing firm in the midst of surrounding waters. The oceans fell back to their assigned place, and the land stood steady upon its foundations. The sun shone upon land and sea, and then life was renewed upon the faces of the earth. Rain fell gently once more, and clouds of fleece floated across gray skies. The waters were purified, and the sediment sank, and life increased in abundance. Life was renewed, but it was different. Man survived, but he was not the same. The sun was not as it had been, and the moon and a moon had been taken away. Man stood in the midst of renewal and regeneration, and he looked up into the heavens above in fear, for the awful powers of darkness and destruction lurking there. Henceforth, the placid skies would hold a terrifying secret, but man found the new earth firm and the heavens fixed. He rejoiced, but also feared, for he lived in dread that the heavens would again bring forth monsters and crash about him. And when men came forth from their hiding places and refuges, the world their fathers had known was gone forever. The face of the land was changed, and earth was littered with rocks and stones, which had fallen when the structure of heaven collapsed. One generation groped in desolation and gloom, and as the thick darkness was dispelled, its children believed they were witnessing a new creation. Time passed, memory dimmed, and record of events was no longer clear. Generation followed generation, and as the ages unfolded, new tongues and new sounds replaced those of the old. Alan, do you want to comment?
Well, I look at everything outside of the Word as a type of novel format, but I couldn't really refute what you're saying to be anti-biblical, because you look at Genesis 1 and 2, and it's in 2, it says the earth was without form and void. If you take that to the Hebrew, it can mean that it was destructed, laid waste, that it became a desert. So there's many, many different ways to look at Genesis. I think it would be closed-minded to say that any of us knows exactly what happened prior to Genesis 1 and 2. I'm open to possibilities. I've researched it somewhat, and I don't believe the world to be 6,000 years old. I think the dinosaurs did roam the earth here much longer than that. I believe that there was earth ages prior to this, whether it was angelic or human. I'm not really sure. It's not something that I would really be preaching or trying to force on anyone. I would just exhort everyone to keep an open mind and to look at this as an extremely interesting passages. In Jeremiah 4:23, it says, I looked on the earth, and behold, it was formless and void. That's tohu and bohu. That's exactly what is being spoken of in Genesis 2. It said, I looked on the mountains, and behold, they were quaking. So, and on the hills moved to and fro. I looked, and behold, there was no man, and all the birds of heavens had fled. So there was birds prior to that. Birds of the heavens can speak of demonic creatures as well, metaphorically in the Gospels. And I looked, and behold, the fruitful land was a wilderness, and all the cities were pulled down before the Lord in his fierce anger. So what Jeremiah is seeing here is either to take place in the future or to take in place prior to Genesis 2, or it's cyclic, and it will take place in both those instances. So I'm open to to seek this and learn more about it. Highly interesting.
Well, I think it just, it's interesting in that it just adds to, because nowhere else have I found anything written about the destruction of the first world age. And I talk about that in my book, and I have this particular passage in my book as well when I'm talking about, and I bring out 2 Peter as well too. But I do believe, like you, that the first world age, the spiritual world age, I feel that it was destroyed, and that the Lord destroyed it because the angels had corrupted it so completely that that the Lord had to destroy it. And like with him wiping out the hybrids with the flood, that was also a destruction. But Kevin, you want to comment?
Yeah, I perfectly agree with the 3 world ages, and as you well know, and Brother Allen. And I just want to make known, just so people don't think that we're divisive on this issue. My standpoint is just from the not from the 3rd world age context, but as far as, and I want to stipulate this just so people don't think that we're arguing with each other, but as far as the camps of the Nibiru Rahab are concerned, the Planet X are concerned, I don't want people to think that the world is going to, and there's a lot of people in those camps that we need to reach, Brother Z and Brother Allen, that really are falling for this, that a planet is going to come and crush the planet Earth and destroy it, and that's my standpoint on this. The rest of what you are speaking of, as far as what you just read from the Kolbrin Bible, is not even relating to what I was saying, talking about earlier. So yes, I do wholeheartedly believe in those 3 world ages, and I think that nails it right there in those first paragraphs that you read. But I want to let folks know that to be very weary when it comes to the Planet X or the what's being sold to us as the destruction of our planet, because our Father never told us that He would destroy the earth. And I you know what, I got to get a hold of that.
Kevin,
I got to get a hold of that Kolbrin.
Let's focus here, man. Let's focus on the topic.
I got to get a hold of that Kolbrin Bible. I can tell you that.
Planet X, but let's focus on what I'm covering as far as what I'm reading. So
yeah, I think it nails.
I'm going to continue on. This is chapter 3. It's called the Flood of Atuma, and I'm not going to read the full entire description of this particular account, only up until a certain part, but just the very beginning. And this particular part talks about a partial flood that was brought on to destroy the Tower of Babel, and that they were creating all that. And again, I don't give any credence. I'm just reading what it says. I'm not saying that this is biblical, that this is scriptural, that this is in truth fact. I'm not making any of those claims. I'm just reading what it says and giving you a chance to hear it.
Brother Z, can I ask you a question,
without judging the work. So just,
when you were reading
the flood of Attila.
Okay, I was going to ask you, when you were reading that, when in your reading, when the planet was surrounded with the red cloud, you were speaking as far as the first world age, as that covering it, correct?
Yeah.
When that's what the Kolbrin Bible is saying.
Destruction of the first world age.
Gotcha.
All right. The flood of Attila. Behold, was this not written in the days of our fathers' fathers and of their fathers before them, and given unto us that we should pass it in to you, the children of days yet unborn, that if the ability of the scribe remains with you, it could be read in your generation. Read, O children of the unborn years, and absorb the wisdom of the past, which is your heritage, the enlightening words from a past which is to you in days so far away and yet in truth so near. We are taught that we live forever, and this is true, but it is equally true that no moment of life must be wasted, for each hour and day on earth is a shaping for the future. We are the inheritors of a portion of time. We can dissipate it on futile things or utilize it on everlasting benefits. In the days of our fathers, before barren teachings clogged the thoughts of men, and vain formal ritual built a wall which obscured understanding, men walked in the light of truth. They knew there was one God alone, but because they walked in the light of truth, because they allowed their higher abilities to fall to disuse, they saw less clearly. And because he appeared in different aspects, they thought he was many. Now, in our days, God has many varied forms in the eyes of men, and each declares he alone knows the true name and the likeness of God. Here all men fall into error, though all have spoken truly according to their understanding. But truth can never bow to the limited understanding of man. The comprehension of man must expand to grasp it. In olden times there were spawned great monsters and beasts in fearful form, with frightful gnashing teeth and long ripping claws. An elephant was but a cat in comparison with them. Then, because of heavenly rebellion and turmoil and terror overwhelming the hearts of men, the Great One hardened the face of the land, which had become unstable, and the beasts were changed to stone. This was before times when the destroyer was still slumbered in the upper vaults of heaven. Thus it is written in the record of Belshazzar, in those days the people were wicked. And though the wise men among them gave many warnings of the wrath to come, they would not listen. And such is the way of the wicked. So it came about that the chastening spirit became stirred up against them, because of the odor of wickedness arising from the earth. For her nostrils abhor the smell of evil. This is a smell no man can know. For as the hounds know the smell of fear, which no man can detect, so can other beings know the smell of wickedness. The great floodgates which are above the earth were all open, and thus the floodwaters rose up to cover the land, and great rainstorms lashed down. The winds could no longer discover their destination. The people left the plain of Shinar and fled up into a great mountain rising above the flatlands. And here, near the summit, they camped feeling themselves secured. The wicked mock, saying, "No water can ever reach up here, for there is not enough of it, heaven or on earth." And still the waters rose ever higher, and the mouths of the wicked were silent. The priests of the people danced and chanted in vain, and performed rituals to appease the wrath above. There came a period of quietness, and then the gateway to the heaven, wherein the chief of interpreters might commune with the other realm. What's interesting to me about this particular story is that in the book of Jubilees, there's a mention of a partial flood. And I think it's only a couple scriptures long, but I do remember that there was a mention of a partial flood, and so I'd never seen that or read that anywhere else, and so I saw that here. Alan, you want to comment here?
Amos speaks about, I think it's about in the 8:8 area, of great waters being brought up over Tyre, I believe it is, and they'll never be seen again. Isaiah 24 and many other areas such as 6 seal point to such devastation and the earth being brought off its foundations, which again the Kolbrin Bible does speak about, that there is going to be great tsunamis. Also, it's, prophecies regarding Bob out in the end days, as well as in Luke 21, says that the waves will be roaring, and in Jeremiah 50 or 51 that the waters will be brought up over Babylon. So tsunamis will play a part in our future as well. And why I'm interested in this book is, in this concept, is because you look at Exodus, and there's a massive amount of prophetic revelation that people skip over here. You just plug in the 2 witnesses, the second Exodus prophecies mentioned throughout the prophets, and the parallels between Exodus and the book of Revelation with things like locusts, bloodied water, darkness, boils, frogs being demonic beings in Revelation, hail. All these things are mentioned in the Kolbrin Bible in just a few short, quick chapters, and I can't really find in the chapters that I read about the return of the Red Dragon / Nibiru, its possibilities, that is anti-biblical or anti-day of the Lord. And so the cohesive factor here, what really makes this of a high interest, is that the prophecies Zechariah Sitchin brings forth, which again is from fallen angels, but there's a lot of truth to what he's saying. It's just that sin that's Antichrist, that's the devastator, is that the book of Exodus was approximately 3,600 years ago. So this also ties into this big jigsaw puzzle, and we've had books like First Enoch, Maccabees, Esdras taken away for us. So to think that there's not some things that to be searched otherwise, I think that's a little bit naive. And again, it's a glory of God to conceal a matter, but it's the glory of a king, a spiritual king, to seek it out. So all this seems to be fitting into a great jigsaw puzzle. And again, all these books, such as First Enoch, surfacing in this day and age, as well as the availability of the internet and many other sacred texts, which can lead you astray if you give them too much credence, seems to be pointing to a picture that is being painted.
Yeah, it's interesting to me is that in having studied, the whole wealth of Scripture and holy words and holy works and what is considered holy books by different people, is that there's so many different things that are mentioned. There's wormwood in Revelation. There's Planet X. There's Niburu. There's the Sumerian. There's the destroyer of the Kolbrin Bible. And I'm not saying that they're connected, but it seems interesting to me that they keep repeating the same phenomena. And so, whether we give any credence to whether these events are going to happen in the future or not, or a planet Nibiru coming back towards the earth or not, it seems to me, even in Revelation, there's written about, destruction on the earth and asteroids hitting. Even in the Bible code, there's a lot mentioned about asteroids impacting the earth and destroying, the ships of the sea and polluting and poisoning the waters and the rivers. And in reading and bringing forth what the Kolbrin Bible says and making it available to the listening audience, because most of you have never heard of it or even had chance to read of it, it's quite poetic. It's very eloquent in its presentation in the way that it describes the events that happened in the past, which we have no other really detailed accounting of. Even though we know the Bible talks about the three world ages, and I talk about this in my book for those that don't know about it. Basically, the first world age is the spiritual age, when everybody was in spiritual being in angelic form before we incarnated into flesh. And it was in that we were witness to the war in heaven, the rebellion of Lucifer, and the banishment of 1/3 of the angels. And then the angels were part of those that incarnated into the flesh, and that especially those that were of the middle ground that made no decision one way or the other, were part of those that incarnated into the flesh in what would be the second world age. And the second world age happened and began when Lucifer seduced Eve in the garden and impregnated her with Cain, who became the firstborn son of the devil, the firstborn son of Satan, and Adam impregnated with Abel, whom Cain slew, whom Cain murdered. And then Seth was the second son, and he was the line from which all the patriarchs were born. And those were the two lines that the whole Genesis 3:15 enmity between her seed and thy seed, that war was going to perpetuate. And that began the second world age, which would go on for 7,000 years, according to Scripture, that there would be, much like 7 days of creation, 7,000 years, these 7 days, which would make up the second world age. And then there would be a third world age where all this duality and evil and that we see now would be eliminated. There would no longer be any of that, and it would no longer be perpetuated. The Lord would no longer allow it. And evil and judgment would come into being, and salvation would be granted to those of the righteous and those that were of the wicked, the wheat and the tares. We're talking about the harvest here. And the Lord put in His Word all these different signs. And so I'm just bringing forth all these different scriptures so that people can, just hear them and judge for yourself. Go read them for yourself and decide for yourself whether they're relevant or not. I'm making no claim one way or the other. But I'm going to go ahead and take this call on area code 804 just to see if they want to make a comment. Area code 804, did you have a question or comment?
Yes, I have lived through a lot of bizarre circumstances, and a lot of religions create a lot of problems. And I think what people have to do is really look within and try and, whatever they've done in their past, become more spiritual and loving with one another, and look into whatever spiritual religions they want, but with caution. And again, I have found that my strength comes from just asking Jesus to come into my heart and help me fulfill my mission in this life according to His will. As far as what's prophesied, we're all going to die a physical death. And that, again, should be an awakening for everyone, everywhere, to see that we're here for a very short period. And what are we doing with our time to make the world a better place, to make peace with our brothers and try and achieve a spiritual life in the physical plane, so that when we go into the spiritual plane again, we will have accomplished some of the lessons we came here to learn.
Yeah, I fully agree with you, brother. I think that is what all this is about, is in developing a relationship with the Father and the Son, and that's true religion. It's a personal relationship. It's not about a building. It's not about a book. It's not one day a week. It's an every moment, every second kind of thing. And so I applaud you in your walk, brother, and I hope that you can continue to grow. All of us continue to grow in the Word and in the Lord, and I'm encouraged by your speaking, and I thank you for calling in.
Well, I thank you for allowing me to speak, and God bless you for your work, and I hope that anyone listening will do exactly what you said. Look within and ask for guidance, and it doesn't matter, if you've done some bad things in your past, you still have time to atone for them on the physical plane. But at the very least, even if you think you're a wonderful person, you're not. There's a lot more you can do with actions, kind actions, get out there, stir up the world, do some things with love in your heart and extend that to others so that as you be the example, they may become an example themselves someday.
Absolutely. That's what it's all about, brother. That's why the Lord came into the flesh, an example to us through his, life and his work and his being, the kindness and the courtesy, the compassion, the foot washing, who is the greatest among you? He that serves the other, and then you serving each other and loving one another, and that's what it's all about. And so God bless you, brother.
Thank you very much again. God bless you.
Thank you. We'll take this one last call, see if they want a question, comment. Area code 770, did you have a question or a comment? Yeah, I think it's just a listener.
I think I'm just listening. So.
All right, yeah, they're just listening in. All right, Alan, did you want to comment on what that brother said, and then we'll go on?
I really like what he said about what to do with our time, but I'm not sure exactly where he was coming from on making the world a better place. That sounds a little Rick Warren-ish. God's about division and selection, and he's about the harvest. So I believe and I know that Christ wants us centered on the harvest and centered on salvation, because you can do a lot of great things outside of his name, but if it doesn't account or lead to or facilitate eternal salvation, it's really kind of pointless.
Yeah, it should all be focused on that. And when that's the Holy Grail. For me, there is no other focus. But you do try to help others in everyday life and being. And that goes to not just other individuals, but also the animals that I come across in my everyday life, and even in dealing with the planet and with everything. I want to be kind and courteous and appreciate the sacredness of everything, and that the Lord really blessed everything with its own life and being and its own reason for existence. And so I just try to honor that, and I do try to make what we can do while we're here, make this a better place for our children and for I don't think we have much longer really, but anyways, we're going to go ahead and get back into this because this is pretty interesting information. This next part has to do with the children of Cain, and we know that it talks about how Cain became a city builder and how he built the first city for his firstborn son Enoch, who is not the Enoch of Seth's line who the Lord translated before his death. But it talks about the seduction of the children of Adam and Seth and how they became polluted, and then it goes into the story of Noah, which in this book, the Kolbrin Bible, they call him Hanok. So this is from chapter 4 of that particular thing. It's called the Deluge. It is written in the great book of the Firehawk that earth was destroyed twice, once altogether by fire and once partially by water. The destruction by water was the lesser destruction and came about in this manner. The people of those times spurned all spiritual things, and men lived only for pleasure, caring little for the good of mankind or the future of the people. Lewdness and lies were upon the tongues of all men, and brother could not deal justly with brother. The princes and governors and proper tribute was not paid. The statutes were held up to scorn. The lives of men were ruled by their desires, and they spent their days in gluttony, drunkenness, fornication, dancing and singing to instruments of music. The land was unattended, for men dissipated their strength in unproductive lusts and pleasures. Women lacked shame, for many would cast their glances after one man. Men fought among themselves and even slew one another because of their lust for worthless women. While the chaste women were not sought, they were even rejected, for men declined the effort of being worthy of them in the eyes of their fathers. Wives were unhonored, and only the women of pleasure commanded the attentions of men. Women were unclean and immodest, and men lay with them shamelessly in the presence of one another. Old women were more lustful than even the young ones, while virgins were seduced and corrupted in their childhood. Fathers fornicated before their sons and were admired for their prowess. They made no distinction between their sons and other men, or between their wives and other women. Deceit and violence were seen on every hand. To the east and north were high mountains, upon which dwelt a tribe called the sons of Nezerah, the men of the mountains, who were hardy men and mighty hunters, skilled in the chase and valiant in battle. The men were upright, their wives were faithful, and their sons noble. In their hearts were no unworthy thoughts, no envy or hate, no malice or deceitfulness. They did not smile before a man's face, uttering smooth words. Then, when he turned his back, reach out to stab him. In their wives and daughters there was no impure longing, and neither cursing nor lying was heard among them. The womenfolk respected their men and decorum, yet there were men with men's ways of whoring, all forms of unmanliness and degeneracy. Therefore, the treasures in the cities of the plains and the weakness of the people to whom these belonged did not go unnoticed by the sons of Nezerah. So they said among themselves, "Let us go down and do a good deed among these people. Let us show them the ways of men who are strong, making them slaves, and possessing ourselves of their goods." This talk continued among the men in the marketplaces and gatherings until they were stirred up to deeds, and they gathered together a war band of fighting men. The mountain men chose leaders from among themselves after their custom and prepared to fall upon the soft-living people of the plain and to become their masters. When the chiefs of the mountain men saw what was happening, they became wroth and ordered their men to return to their flocks and pastures. The chief of chiefs stood up before the gathered warband and said, "It is our decree that this thing shall not be done. You must not go down from these mountains bringing the sword to these people. Leave them alone. As rotted fruit is left on the tree to wither and die, leave them to follow their own ways a little longer, and in the fullness of time they will destroy themselves. Make no widows among your own. If you go down there carrying fire and sword, you may find a trap laid for you among the flesh pots. The attraction of their pleasure and the temptation of their luxuries is too strong. Men such as you, like the lure of flame, have for the moth. Do not lay yourselves open to destruction, even though the manner of its accomplishment be pleasant. If you must destroy this people, then destroy utterly, so nothing remains. They are many, while we are few, and though by the keen, hard-hitting sword we may prevail in battle, yet might we not be lost under a deluge of soft feathers? Will ye be wise enough to sup on milk and honey without being drowned in it?" For a time the fighting men heeded the words of their chiefs, for they were neither willful nor reckless, but were some among them who went down to the plains in peace. They returned with tales of treasures and pleasures awaiting below, reporting that the time was ripe for an attack. The warmen hired by the lowlanders having departed, for in those days the gods of Sharpik strove against the gods of Elishter and Ladek. Then the fighting men disregarded the commands of their chiefs, and choosing war captains from among themselves, went down and fell upon the people of the plain. The people of the plain bowed before the strength of the men of the mountains. They did not fight, for among all their possessions they regarded their lives as the most valuable thing, precious above all else. They said, "Take whatever we have, our riches and harvest, the treasured things from our dwelling, even our daughters for your amusement, but leave us enough that we may live under your shadow." The sturdy men of the mountain were sickened by these half-men who had lived for 3 generations without fighting, and they despised them. The battle-hardened men who had come down from the highlands took whatsoever they desired. The plainsmen demurred, but because their stomachs turned to water before the virility of their conquerors and their protestations were words of wind, the victors clothed themselves in plundered finery and indulged themselves in the wines and delicacies of the food tables. They slept in the beds of luxuries and dissipation, every want being attended to by the vanquished. They learned the ways of sensuality which goes with soft living, and when satiated with natural pleasures, some lightened their boredom with unnatural ones. The mountain men saw that the women of the cities were beautiful, but they were not modest. They casting their charms before their masters, unashamed. So it followed they were taken, when required, and treated as chattels. The women did not complain, though hitherto they had stood equal with their menfolk. But women's equality with half men is not something of value. With women like this, the men placed no restraint on their lust, and went from excess to excess. The women, rejoicing in the strength and vigor of the men, said amongst themselves, "Here are men indeed, such as we have not known before." Then, in the manner of women, they turned away from their own men and from the households of their husbands and fathers, for now they despised them. They threw off all the womanly restraint and grappled with the victors like ravening beasts, and the strong were vanquished by weakness. Always do women behave thus when their men are defeated in battle. It is for this men fight. None came to do battle with the victors, for they who had fought for the gods and destroyed themselves, and in the fullness of time the victors too were destroyed by the flesh pots, and by fornication and drunkenness, by ease and luxury. Their fighting strength and valor departed with the passing years. They grew fat and slothful. They who had come down in manly array to fight and win, who could not be challenged in battle by the lesser men of the plains, were eaten up in the mansions of pleasure, and in the drinking booths, with music and wine and fine linen. Upon the mountains and the mountain homes there were weeping and sadness among the women. Fields were untilled and cattle strayed away. Sheep went unplucked. The best craftsmen were gone, and few remained willing to learn their skill. The teachers of learning taught no more. The gnarled hand that had wielded the sword and terrorized the foe now plucked the strings of psaltery and lyre. The rough jerkins and corselets were cast off, and now garments of fine linen dyed purple and crimson. Men arrayed their softening bodies in gaudy attire and bathed in scented waters. They rejected their own women for those of the cities, whose hands and feet were stained with bright colors, and whose faces were marked with blue. One day from afar off came 3 men of Ardis, the country having been stricken by a mountain burst. They were worshippers of the one God whose light shines within men. And when they had lived in the 2 cities for a number of days, they were stirred up in their hearts because of the things they saw. And so they called upon their God to see these evil things. And their God sent down a curse upon the men of the cities. And there came a strange light and smoky mist, which caught at the throats of men. All things became still and apprehensive. There were strange clouds in the skies, and nights were hung with heaviness. Many days passed before a north wind came, and the skies cleared. But then, when women conceived, they bore devils. Monstrosities came forth from their wombs, whose faces were terrible, and whose limbs were unproportioned. In those days, men knew the art of working clay and making linen in bright colors, and also the use of eye paint. They had knowledge of herbs and enchantment, and the wisdom of the book of the heavens, the knowledge of signs and omens, the secrets of the seasons of the moon and the coming of the waters. The remnants of the sons of Nezerah remained upon the mountains which are against Ardis, by the land about the encampment of Lamech. In Ardis there were wise men filled with the inner wisdom, who read the book of the heaven with understanding, and knew the signs. They saw the deeds of men in all the lands about the mountains. It had brought them to their hour. Then the day came when the lady of the night changed her garment for one of a different hue, and her form swept more swiftly across the skies. Her tresses streamed behind in gold and copper, and she rode in a chariot of fire. The people in those days were a great multitude, and a loud cry ascended into heaven. Then the wise men went to Sharapik, now called Sarapesh, and said to Sisudia, the king, "Behold, the years are shortened, and the hour of trial draws nigh. The shadow approaches this land because of its wickedness. And yet, because you have not mingled with the wicked, you are set apart and shall not perish. This, so your seeds may be preserved." And then the king sent forth for Hanak, son of Hogatir, and he came out and heard a voice among the reeds saying, Abandon your abode and possessions, for the hour of doom is at hand. Neither gold nor treasure can buy a reprieve. And then Hanok came into the cities and said to the governors, Behold, I would go down to the sea and would therefore build a great ship, that I may take my people upon it. With me will go those who trouble you, and they will take the things which cause you concern. Therefore you will be left in peace to your own enjoyment. The governor said, Come to the sea and build your ship there, and it will be well for you to go with our blessings. But Hanok answered them and said, It has been told to me in a dream that the ship should be built against the mountains, and that the sea will come up to me. And when he had gone away, they declared him mad. The people mocked him, calling him commander of the sea. But they did not hinder him, seeing gain in his undertaking. Therefore a great ship was laid down under the leadership of Hanok, son of Hogatur, for Sasudia, king of Sarapesh, from whose treasury came payment for the building of the vessel. It was built on the lake of Namos, close to the river of gold, where it divides. All household of Hanok was there, in the household of his brother, who directed the men at the cast. Blyven, captain of ships from the land beyond Ardis, was overseer of the craftsmen. The women and children carried and built. The length of the great ship was 300 cubits, and its breadth was 50 cubits, and it was finished off above by 1 cubit. It had 3 stories which were built without a break. The lowermost was for the beasts and cattle, and for their provender, and it was laid over with sand from the river. The middle one was for the birds and the fowls, and for plants of every kind that are good for man and beast, and the uppermost one was for the people. Each story was divided in twain, so that there were 6 floors below and 1 above, and they were divided across with 7 partitions. In it was cisterns for water and storehouses for food, and it was built with ascaria wood, which water cannot rot or worms enter. It was pitched within and without, and the cisterns were lined. The planks were edged, and the joints were made fast with hair and oil. Great stones were hung for ropes of plaited leather, and the ship was without mast or oars. There were no poles and no openings except for the hatch beneath the eaves above whereby all things entered. The hatch was secured by great beams. Into the great ship they carried the seed of all living things, grain laid up in baskets, and many cattle and sheep were slain for meat which was smoked by fire. They also took all kinds of beasts of the field and wild beasts, and birds and fowls, and all things that crawl. Also gold and silver and metals and stones. The people of the plains came up and camped about to see this wonder. Even the sons of Nezerah were among them, and they daily mocked the builders of the great ship. But these were not dismayed, and toiled harder at the task. They said to the mockers, Have your hour, for ours will surely come. On the appointed day, they who were to go with the great ship departed for their homes, and they kilned and embraced the trees, and they gathered up handfuls of the earth. For all this they would see no more. They loaded the great ship with their possessions, and all their provender went with them. They set a ramset over the hatch, pouring out blood, milk, honey, and beer, beating upon their breasts, weeping and lamenting. The people entered the great ship and closed the hatch, making it secure within. The king had entered in with him those of his blood, in all 14, for it was forbidden that his household go into the ship. Of all the people who entered with him, 2 understood the ways of the sun and the moon, and the ways of the year and the seasons. 1 the quarrying of stones, 1 the making of bricks, and 1 the making of axes and weapons. 1 the playing of musical instruments, 1 bread, 1 the making of pottery, 1 the care of gardens, and 1 the carving of wood and stone. 1 the making of roofs, 1 the making of cheese and butter, 1 the growing of trees and plants, 1 the making of plows, 1 the weaving of cloth and making of dyes, and 1 the brewing of beer. 1 the felling and cutting of trees, 1 the making of chariots, 1 dancing, 1 the mysteries of the scribe, 1 the building of houses and the working of lettuce. There was 1 skilled in the working of cedar and willow wood, and he was a hunter, 1 who knew the cunning of games and circus, and he was a watchman. There was an inspector of water and walls, a magistrate, and a captain of men. There were 3 servants of God, and there was Hanok and his brother and their households, and Blyven and 6 men who were strangers. Then, with the dawning, men saw an awesome sight. There, riding on a great black rolling cloud, came the destroyer, newly released from the confines of the sky vaults, and she raged about the heavens, for it was her day of judgment. The beast with her opened its mouth and belched forth fire, and the heavens, for it was and belched forth fire and hot stones and a vile smoke. It covered the whole sky above, and the meeting place of the earth and the heavens could no longer be seen. In the evening, the places of the stars were changed. They rolled across the sky to new stations. Then the floodwaters came. That sounds like a pole shift, doesn't it? The floodgates of heaven were opened, and the foundations of earth were broken apart. The surrounding waters poured over the land and broke upon the mountains. The storehouses of the winds burst their bolts asunder. So storms and whirlwinds were loosed to hurl themselves upon the earth. In the seething waters and howling gales, all buildings were destroyed. Trees were uprooted and mountains cast down. There was a time of great heat, and then came a time of bitter cold. The waves or the waters did not rise and fall, but seethed and swirled, and there was an awful sound above. The pillars of the heaven were broken and fell down to earth. The sky vault was rent and broken. The whole of creation was in chaos. The stars in the heavens were loosened from their places, so they dashed about in confusion. There was a revolt on high. A new ruler appeared there and swept across the sky in majesty. Those who had not labored at the building of the great ship and those who had mocked the builders came quickly to the place where it was lying. They climbed upon the ship and beat upon it with their hands. They raged and pleaded but could not enter inside, and nor could they break the wood. As the great ship was borne up by the waters, it rolled and there was swept off, for there was no foothold for them. The ship was lifted by the mighty surge of waters and hurled among the debris, but it was not dashed upon the mountainside because of the place where it was built. All the people not saved within the ship were swallowed up, and in the midst of the raging confusion, and their wickedness and their corruption was purged away from the face of the earth. The swelling waters swept up to the mountaintop and filled the valleys. They did not rise like waters poured into a bowl, but came in great surging torrents. When the tumult and the waters became still, they stood no more than 3 cubits above the earth. The destroyer passed away into the fastness of heaven, and the great flood remained 7 days, diminishing day by day, as the waters drained away to spread out calmly, and the great ship drifted among a brown scum and debris of all kinds. After many days, the great ship came to rest on Pont Cardo in the mountains of Ashtar against Nishan in the land of God. Alan, I'm going to get you to comment here, and then I'm going to go ahead and extend this show 30 minutes. You mind hanging out 30 minutes more because I want to read the next passage from this particular thing.
Yeah, my pleasure. So I read it on either the Locust Army 1 or 2 show, and I don't have it right in front of me right now, but I believe it's Jasher, possibly Jubilees, around the 4th chapter, with the tale of the flood. It speaks about the earth, basically tottering to and fro, being shaken violently, being torrents amongst the flood. So Ezekiel 26 and 19 says, I shall bring up the deep, which is the great quantities of water, or the ocean, over you, and great waters will cover you. And it speaks about them descending down to the pit and being brought down to the people of old. And Amos 8:8 says, because of this will not the land quake, and everyone who dwells in it mourn? Indeed, all of it will rise up like the Nile, and it will be tossed about and subside like the Nile. And in that day, that I will make the sun, moon, and make the earth dark in broad daylight. So if you examine a pole shift, according to prominent scientists, you're looking at the equator will actually decrease or drop literally 25 kilometers, and where the new pole will end up appearing, that land will actually literally rise up 25 to 30 kilometers. Another place that you can find what we're speaking about regarding Nibiru is the fact that there's a great red dragon mentioned in Revelation 12 in the sky, borrowing from Lynn Templeton. I think that the Lord is giving us a hint about the red sky in Matthew 16, 2 and 3. And Isaiah 13, which is a prophecy regarding the return of the Nephilim, the Septuagint directly refers to it as them being the giants returning. It's a correct interpretation, the Gabor of Revelation 6:4. It says that in 13 and 5, so they come from a far country, from the end of heaven. So what that is truly saying in the Hebrew is that they're coming from a remote world, from the extremity of visible space. And I can't see anything else here lining up, because of all the things that are landing upon the earth in the trumpets seem to parallel what's being spoken of in this book so directly. You've got a sort of an escalation of physicals descending upon the earth, and it steps up. So again, that star wormwood could be interpreted as an angel. It obviously can't be a star, but I don't know. The more that I'm hearing you speak, Zen, and just tying it into the timeline of when the flood was, Jasher, some of Sitchin's work, which I don't aspire to, he's definitely an antichrist. Then you've got Exodus, and then you've got the book of Revelation, all the pole shifts you can read about in Isaiah 24. What else is going to make the earth stagger and reel to and fro? You just track back with the timing, and you can't say me this with 100% certainty, but again, it's definitely worth researching. And someone's going to have an explanation if this thing shows up in the sky. So I believe this to be divinely inspired. And when this thing does show up, everyone who's listening and has got a Bible is going to be able to preach and teach their way out for our Father.
What's so interesting to me about this Kolbrin Bible, and like I said, it's a huge collection of works. It's thicker than the King James Version of the Bible. Is that it talks about, again, the destruction of the first world age, which I haven't found in many places at all, except for in several references in the Word, but nowhere else ever mentioned, and especially not in this particular amount of detail. And then all the different accounts. It's just interesting because, the story of Noah and the end of the flood is in the Kolbrin Bible, and the deluge, and how, everybody doubts that there was ever a worldwide flood, and yet it's recanted over and over in all the different mythologies of the world. But so that's why I wanted to share this with people. Is just not saying it's authentic or it's truth. Again, make no certainty of that in any way, but just that it's interesting reading, and I think people should at least hear about it or know about it, or at least get the chance to study it for themselves and to make their own determination on it one way or the other. I don't think it's right to judge whole collections of work and scriptures without even looking into them. It doesn't make sense to me, but for some that makes sense, but for me it doesn't. I want to know what it says before I make any determination on whether it has any relevance. Okay, but going in, this is the next part of the destroyer. The next part of where the destroyer is mentioned in the Kolbrin Bible. And what makes this interesting is it gives the account of the Exodus and Moses leading the Hebrew people, the slaves out of Egypt, but it gives it from an Egyptian perspective. So in this accounting, it talks about the Hebrew people as the slaves, and it talks about their God, and this is a really interesting account. I think you guys are going to like this. And so I extended the show for another 30 minutes just because I wanted to get this particular tale on this particular show. This one is called The Destroyer, Part 1, from the Great Skull, and this is from the Book of Manuscripts. Men forget the days of the destroyer. Only the wise know where it went and that it will return in its appointed hour. It raged across the heavens in its days of wrath, and this was its likeness. It was a billowing cloud of smoke enwrapped in a ruddy glow, not distinguishable in joint or limb. Its mouth was an abyss from which came flame, smoke, and hot cinders. When ages pass, certain laws operate upon the stars in the heavens. Their ways change. There is movement and recklessness. They are no longer constant, and the great light appears redly in the skies. When blood drops upon the earth, the destroyer will appear, and mountains will open and belch forth fire and ashes. Trees will be destroyed, and all living things engulfed. Waters will be swallowed in land, and seas will boil. The heavens will burn brightly and redly. There will be a copper hue over the face, and followed by a day of darkness. A new moon will appear and break up and fall. The people will scatter in madness. They will hear the trumpet and battle cry of the destroyer and will seek refuge in the den in the earth. Terror will eat away their hearts, and their courage will flow from them like water from a broken pitcher. They will be eaten up in the flames of wrath and consumed by the breath of the destroyer. Thus, in the days of the heavenly wrath which have gone, and thus it will be in the days of the doom when it comes again. The times of its coming and going are known unto the wise. These are the signs and times which shall precede the destroyer's return. 110 generations shall pass into the west, and nations will rise and fall. Men will fly in the air as birds and swim in the seas and fishes, and men will talk peace with one another, one with another. Hypocrisy and deceit shall have their day. Women will be as the men, and men as women. Passion will be a plaything of man. A nation of soothsayers shall rise and fall, and their tongue shall be the speech learned. A nation of lawgivers shall rule the earth and pass away into nothingness. One worship will pass into the four quarters of the earth, talking peace and bringing war. A nation of the seas will be greater than any other, but will be as an apple rotten at the core and will not endure. A nation of traitors will destroy men with wonders, and it shall have its day. Then shall the high strive with the low, and the north with the south, the east with the west, and the light with the darkness. Men shall be divided by their races, and the children will be born as strangers among them. Brother shall with brother. This from Matthew 24, and I'm not sure this is what I was talking about with the Egyptian pharaoh. It might go into that, but I'm going to continue reading. Women will become the common property of men and will no longer be held in regard and respect. Then men will be ill at ease in their hearts, and they will seek they know not what, and uncertainty and doubt will trouble them. They will possess great riches, but be poor in spirit. Then will the heavens tremble and the earth move. Men will quake in fear, and while terror walks with them, the heralds of doom will appear. They will come softly as thieves to the tombs. Men will know them for what they are. Men will be deceived. The hour of the destroyer is at hand, and in those days men will have the great book before them. Wisdom shall be revealed. The few will be gathered for the stand, because it is the hour of trial. The dauntless ones will survive. The stout-hearted will not go down to destruction. Great God of all ages, alike to all, who sets the trials of man. Be merciful to our children in days of doom. Man must suffer to be great, but hasten not his progress unduly in the great winnowing. Be not too harsh on the lesser ones among men. Even the son of a thief has become your scribe. Okay, yeah, it is going to go into the part with the Pharaoh and how he chases down what are called the slaves in this particular book. But, Alan, I want to get you to comment on that last part that I read. It was kind of Matthew 24-ish, wasn't it?
Reading just these chapters, and I don't think I'd go as far as reading the entire book right now because I'm just too caught up in the Bible. But
oh, of course.
Yeah, it's to me, not even to me. There is dozens and dozens and dozens of exact parallels with the day of the Lord. So I don't believe this book to be divinely inspired. But like Ben said, you can't throw out the baby with the bathwater. I've had extra biblical works open up the Word for me. So it's just like something like First Enoch. It's like I could not have understood that paradigm, that reality, that dimension of prophecy or the spirit realm without that book. So some people consider it anti-biblical, but again, the Word of God is always a filter. So you just pull whatever through it, and if something opens up anything in the Word for you, I believe that we should be all over something like that. And the First Enoch speaks of stars changing their orders, and I don't have time to go into it right now, but there is another Exodus, the second Exodus. We go to a place called Bozrah. That's where the bride is supernaturally protected. There are going to be leaders. There are going to be deliverers. There is an end-time Pharaoh that you can read about. I believe it's in Ezekiel 28, 29, 30. He is a type of Leviathan, a great monster. So many things here just seem to really line up with the Word. And if people are still not seeing this, just store it on the shelf. But my question to you would be, why does the book of Revelations mention a great red dragon, which is a pyros, a great pyros dragon, which specifically means, it only means in the Greek having the color of fire, and it's in the sky. So because you don't see something directly handed to you just on a silver platter, like a little paragraph to explain everything to you, the Word of God doesn't work that way. It's in idioms, it's in metaphors, it's in parables. It's a type of matrix. So when you're starting to move from book to book to book to book, and you're seeing things come out from all the books, sort of like collaboration or a mosaic. The truth is there. You're never ever going to find deep truths in the Word of God just by reading, little excerpts and thinking that you understand it. It's supernatural. It's multi-leveled, and it's even encrypted, so is that only those who the Lord, gives, and it's His disciples, it's the cross bearers that will understand the parables and the deep truths.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Alan. It's like a puzzle for me. Now, in seeking the Word of the Lord and wanting to know truth, I can't just discount everything without even looking into it, or anything for that matter. And so I study everything, I read everything. But of course, my foundation is in the Word, and you know that I'm a servant of Yahweh and Yahushua, Savior, Messiah, and the Old Testament, the Torah, the Commandments, the Ten Commandments. So I fully give credence to the Word and use that as a foundation. But you're right. I've found so many other things in these extra biblical texts, or just even other books that have strengthened me in the Word, and broadened my understanding and my discernment of it. And so, continuing on, O sentinels of the universe who watch for the destroyer, how long will your coming vigil last? O mortal men who wait without understanding, where will you hide yourselves in the dread days of doom, when the heavens shall be torn apart and the skies rent in twain, in the days when children will turn gray-headed? This is the thing which will be seen. This is the terror your eyes will behold. This is the form of destruction that will rush upon you. There will be the great body of fire, the glowing head with mouths and eyes ever-changing. Terrible teeth will be seen in formless mouths, and a fearful dark belly will glow redly from fires inside. Even the most stout-hearted man will tremble, and his bowels be loosened, for this is not a thing of understandable to men. It will be a vast, sky-spanning form, enwrapping earth and burning with many hues within. Wide open mouths, these will descend to sweep across the face of the land, engulfing all in its yawning jaws. The greatest warriors will charge against it in vain. The fangs will fall out, and lo, they are terror-inspiring things of cold, hardened water. Great boulders will be hurled down upon men, crushing them into red powder, as the great salt waters rise up in its train and roaring torrents pour towards the land. Even the heroes among mortal men will become with madness, as moths flying swiftly to their doom in the burning flame. So will these men rush to their own destruction. The flames going before will devour all the works of men. The waters following will sweep away whatever remains. The dew of death will fall softly as gray carpet over the cleared land, and men will cry out in their madness, "Oh, whatever being there is, save us from this tall form of terror. Save us from the gray dew of death." Part 3. The dune shape called the destroyer in Egypt was seen in all the lands whereabouts. In color it was bright and fiery, in appearance changing and unstable. It twisted about itself like a coil, and fiery in appearance, changing and unstable, like water bubbling into a pool from an underground supply, and all men agree it was the most fearsome sight. It was not a great comet or a loosened star, being more like a fiery body of flame. Its movements on high were slow. Below it swirled in the manner of smoke, and it remained close to the sun, whose face it hid. There was a bloody redness about it, which changed as it passed along its course. It caused death and destruction in its rising and setting. It swept the earth with great cinder rain and caused many plagues, hunger, and other evils. It bit the skin of men and beasts until they became mottled with sores. The earth was troubled and shook. The hills and mountains moved and rocked. The dark, smoke-filled heavens bowed over earth, and a great howl came to the ears of men, borne to them upon the wings of the wind. It was the cry of the dark Lord, the master of dread. Thick clouds of fiery smoke passed before him, and there was an awful hail of hot stones and coals of fire. The doom-shaped thundered sharply in the heavens and shot out bright lightnings. The channels of water were turned back unto themselves, and when the land tilted, and great trees were tossed about and snapped like twigs. Then a voice like 10,000 trumpets was heard over the wilderness, and before its burning breath the flames parted. The whole of the land moved, and mountains melted. The sky roared like 10,000 lions in agony, and bright arrows of blood sped back and forth across its face. Earth swelled up like bread upon the earth. This was the aspect of the doom shape called the Destroyer. When it appeared in days long gone by in olden times, it is thus described in the old records, few of which remain. It is said that when it appears in the heaven above, earth splits open from the heat like a nut roasted before the fire. Then flames shoot up through the surface and leap about like fiery fumes upon black blood. The moisture inside the surface, the moisture in the land is all dried up in the pastures, and cultivated places are consumed in flames, and they and all the trees become white ash. The doom shape is like a circling ball of flame which scatters small fiery offspring in its train. It covers about a fifth part of the sky and sends writhing snake-like fingers down to the earth. Before the sky appears frightened, and it breaks up and scatters away. Midday is no brighter than night. It spawns a host of terrible things. These things said of the Destroyer in the old records, read them with a solemn heart, knowing that the doom shape has its appointed time and will return. It would be foolish to let them go unheeded. Now, men say, such things are not destined for our days. May the great God above grant that to be so. But come, the day surely will, and in accordance with his nature, man will be aired. This next part, which is the final part we're going to cover today, is called the Dark Days. And this is the aftermath of this particular thing, whatever it is, the Destroyer coming through the skies, and this is what happened to Egypt. And this is during the time where Moses is leading them out during the Exodus. This is a really incredible passage. The Dark Days began with the last visitation of the Destroyer, and they were foretold by strange omens in the skies. All men were silent and went about with pale faces. The leaders of the slaves which had built the city to the glory of Tom stirred up unrest, and no man raised his arm against them. They foretold great events of which the people were ignorant and of which the temple seers were not informed. These were the days of the ominous calm, when the people waited for they knew not what. The presence of an unseen doom was felt. The hearts of men were stricken. Laughter was heard no more, and grief and wailing sounded throughout the land. Even the voices of children were stilled, and they did not play together, but stood as silent. The slaves became bold and insolent, and women were the possessions of any man. Fear walked the land, and women became barren with terror. They could not conceive, and those with child aborted. All men closed up within themselves. The days of stillness were followed by a time when the noise of trumpeting and shrilling was heard in the heavens. And the people became as frightened without a herdsman, as asses when lions prowl without their foal. The people spoke of the God of the slaves, and reckless men said, if we knew where this God were to be found, we would sacrifice to him. But the God of the slaves was not among them. He was not to be found within the swamplands or in the brick pits. His manifestation was in the heavens for all men to see. But they did not see with understanding, nor would any God listen, for all were dumb because of the hypocrisy of men. The dead were no longer sacred and were thrown into the waters. Those already entombed were neglected, and many became exposed. They lay unprotected against the hands of thieves. He who once toiled long in the sun, bearing the yoke himself, now possessed oxen. He who grew no grain, now owned the storehouse full. He who once dwelt at ease among his children, now thirsted for water. He who once sat in the sun with crumbs and dregs was now bloated with food. He reclined in the shade, his bowls overflowing. Cattle were left unattended to roam into strange pastures, and men ignored their marks and slew the beasts of their neighbors. No man owned anything. The public records were cast forth and destroyed, and no man knew who were slaves nor who were masters. The people cried out to the Pharaoh in their distress, but he stopped his ears and acted like a deaf man. There were those who spoke falsely before Pharaoh and had gods hostile towards the land. Therefore, the people cried out for their blood to appease it. But it was not these strange priests who put strife in the land instead of peace. For one was even of the household of Pharaoh and walked among the people unhampered. They're talking about Moses. Dust and smoke clouds darkened the sky and colored the waters upon which they fell with a bloody hue. Plague was throughout the land. The river was bloody and blood was everywhere. The water was vile and men's stomachs shrank from drinking. Those who did drink from the river vomited up, for it was polluted. The dust tore wounds in the skin of man and beast. In the glow of the destroyer, the earth was filled with redness. Vermin bred and filled the air and face of the earth with loathsomeness. Wild beasts afflicted with torments under the lashing sand and ashes came out of their lairs in the wastelands and cave places and stalked the abodes of men. All the tame beasts whimpered, and the land was filled with the cries of sheep and the moan of cattle. Trees throughout the land were destroyed. No herb or fruit was to be found. The face of the land was battered and devastated by a hail of stones, which smashed down all that stood in the path of the torrents. They swept down in hot showers, and strange flowing fire ran along the ground in their wake. The fish of the river died in the polluted waters. Worms, insects, and reptiles sprang up from the earth in huge numbers. Great gusts of wind brought swarms of locusts, which covered the sky as the destroyer flung itself through the heavens. It blew great gusts of cinders across the face of the land. The gloom of a long night spread a dark mantle of blackness, which extinguished every ray of light. None knew when it was day and when it was night, for the sun cast no shadow. The darkness was not the clean blackness of night, but a thick darkness in which the breath of men was stopped in their throats. Men gasped in a hot cloud of vapor, which enveloped all the land and snuffed out all lamps and fires. Men were benumbed and lay moaning in their beds. None spoke to another or took food, for they were overwhelmed with despair. Ships were sucked away from their moorings and destroyed in great whirlpools. It was a time of undoing. The earth turned over as clay spun upon a potter's wheel. The whole land was filled with uproar from the thunder of the destroyer overhead and the cry of the people. There, as the sound of moaning and lamentation on every side, the earth spewed up its dead. Corpses were cast out of their resting places, and the embalmed were revealed to the sight of all men. Pregnant women miscarried, and the seed of men was stopped. The craftsman left his task undone. The potter abandoned his wheel, and the carpenter his tools, and they departed to dwell in the marshes. All crafts were neglected, and the slaves lured the craftsmen away. The dues of Pharaoh could not be collected, for there was neither wheat nor barley, goose nor fish. The rights of Pharaoh could not be enforced, for the fields of grain and the pastures were destroyed. The highborn and the lowly prayed together that life might come to an end and the turmoil and thundering ceased to beat upon the ears. Terror was the companion of men by day, and horror the companion by night. I'm going to skip down a little bit so I can get to the part where they're chasing. There were 9 days of darkness and upheaval, while a tempest raged such as never had been known before. When it passed away, brother hurried brother throughout the land. Men rose up against those in authority and fled from the cities to dwell in the tents in the outlands. Egypt lacked great men to deal with these times. The people were weak from fear and bestowed gold, silver, lapis, lazuli, turquoise, and copper upon the slaves. And to their priests they gave chalices, urns, and ornaments. Pharaoh alone remained calm and strong in the midst of the confusion. The people turned to wickedness in their weakness and despair. Harlots walked through the streets unashamed. Women paraded their limbs and flaunted their womanly charms. High-born women were in rags, and the virtuous were mocked. The slaves spared by the destroyer left the cursed land forthwith. Their multitude moved in the gloom of a half dawn, under a mantle of fine swirling gray ash, leaving the burnt fields and shattered cities behind them. Many Egyptians attached themselves to the host, for one who was great led them forth, a priest, prince of the inner courtyard. Of course, that's Moses. Fire mounted up on high, and its burning left with the enemies of Egypt. It rose up from the ground as a fountain and hung as a curtain in the sky. In 7 days, by Remwar, the accused ones journeyed to the waters. They crossed the heaving wilderness, while the hills melted around them. Above, the skies were torn with lightning. They were sped by terror, but their feet became entangled in the land, and the wilderness shut them in. They knew not the way, for no sign was constant before them. They turned before Nashari and stopped at Shokoth, the place of quarries. They passed the waters of Maha and came by the valley of Pictaroth, northward of Mara. They came up against the waters which blocked their way, and their hearts were in despair. The night was a night of fear and dread, for there was a high moaning above the black winds. From the underworld were loosed, and fire sprang up from the ground. The hearts of the slaves shrank within them, for they knew the wrath of Pharaoh followed them, and that there was no way of escape. They hurled abuse on those who led them. Strange rites were performed along the shore that night. The slaves disputed among themselves, and there was violence. Pharaoh had gathered his army and followed the slaves. After he departed, there were riots and disorders behind him, for the cities were being plundered. The laws were cast out of the judgment halls and trampled underfoot in the streets. The storehouses and granaries were burst open and robbed. Roads were flooded and none could pass along them. People lay dead on every side. The palace was split, and the princes and officials fled so that none was left with authority to command. The lists of numbers were destroyed. Public places were overthrown, and households became confused and unknown. Pharaoh pressed on in sorrow, for behind him all was desolation and death. Before him were things he could not understand, and he was afraid. But he himself well and stood before his host with courage. He sought to bring back the slaves, so the people said their magic was greater than the magic of Egypt. The host of Pharaoh came upon the slaves by the saltwater shores, but was held back from them by a breath of fire. A great cloud was spread over the host and darkened the sky. None could see except for the fiery glow and the unceasing lightnings which rent the covering cloud overhead. A whirlwind arose in the east and swept over the encamped host. A gale raged all night, and in the red twilight dawn there was a movement of the earth. The waters receded from the seashore and were rolled back on themselves. There was a strange silence, and then in the gloom it was seen that the waters had parted, leaving a passage between. The land had risen, but it was disturbed and trembled. The way was not straight or clear. The waters about were as if spun within a bowl. The swampland alone remained undisturbed, and from the horn of the destroyer came a high shrilling noise which stopped the ears of men. The slaves had been making sacrifices in despair. The lamentations were loud, and now before the strange sight there was hesitation and doubt. For the space of a breath they stood still and silent. Then all was confusion and shouting, some pressing forward into the waters against all who sought to flee back from the unstable ground. Then, in exaltation, their leader led them into the midst of the waters. Through the confusion, yet many sought to turn back into the host behind them, while others fled along the empty shores. All became still over the sea and upon the shores, but behind the earth shook and boulders split with a great noise. The wrath of heaven was removed to a distance and stood upwards of the two hosts, and still the host of Pharaoh held its ranks firm, in resolve before the strange and awful happenings, and undaunted by the fury which raged by their side, stern faces lit darkly by the fiery curtain, and then the fury departed, and there was silence. Stillness spread over the land while the host of Pharaoh stood without movement in the red glow. And then with a shout, the captains went forward, and the host rose up behind them. The curtain of fire had rolled up into a dark billowing cloud which spread out as a canopy. There was a stirring of the waters, but they followed the evildoers past the place of the great whirlpool. The passage was confused in the midst of the waters, and the ground beneath unstable. Here in the midst of the tumult of waters, Pharaoh fought against the hindmost of the slaves and prevailed over them, and there was a great slaughter amid the sand and the swamp and the water. Is interesting also about the Kolbrin Bible is that it's one of the only books I've ever found that has a vivid description of what took place in the first destruction, the destruction of the First World Age. But we're going to go into that. But I want to give my co-hosts, Alan Swanson and Kevin Unterberger, a chance to give a shout-out. Kevin, you want to sound off?
Sure. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Once again, I'm blessed to be here with Brother Alan and Brother Zen for another exciting show. And I was looking forward to hearing your thoughts on the Kolbrin Bible while I have never had the opportunity to read it. I trust your discernment, Zen, and Brother Alan's. And while the portion of the show that really tweaked my interest was the thoughts upon Nibiru or Rahab, or as some might call it, Planet X, or wormwood that they correlate it to in the scriptures. And while my views differ from I suspect from yours and Brother Allen's as far as the reality of this particular planet, I in jest before we came onto the show said, well, I'm probably going to be the one that plays devil's advocate. What I should have said is I probably am going to be the one that plays God's advocate as far as the concerning the existence of this planet X, this Nibiru, this Rahab, this wormwood that is spoken of in the scriptures. The scriptures speak of it as wormwood, and I will make my viewpoint known on the show. So I might be in opposition to maybe possibly what you folks, you and Alan, might believe or have come to glean knowledge upon. But that doesn't mean, and that's what this show is all about, I think, folks, is different perspectives. But as far as Planet Nibiru goes, as we get into the show, I'll make my stance known to all of you, and we'll let the listeners decide, where the truth leads them. It's all in the process of us seeking the truth, and I love doing it with you guys, and I think that it's going to be an interesting topic here.
Yeah, but just know that I'm not trying to debate whether this planet is in existence or not. I'm just reading
I know that.
What the Kolbrin Bible says. So.
I know.
But anyways, Alan, do you want to give a shout out?
Yeah. Good afternoon, Fallen Angels TV, weighing and sharpening slaughter prophetic revelations that are, in my opinion, soon to befall the earth. There's nothing I'd rather be doing. Blessed to be here.
Yeah, so I want to, just for those that haven't had a chance to even look at this particular book, it's incredible amount of work put together, and it covers like Genesis to Revelation, it covers from the beginning all the way to the end. But so I'm gonna go into this. Let me hold on one second. I've got to reopen the book. Hold on. It's going to take me just a second. Hey, Alan, have you read some of this, right? Why don't you comment a little bit while I open this document about what you think you read?
Okay, well, Zen had pulled out about 5 chapters from this book. I would say it would be on paper, say maybe about 15 pages maximum. This is a breakdown of the day of the Lord. You have a ridiculous, tight, highly prophetically crammed full of parallels to what is known in the Word as the day of the Lord, what occurs at the inception of the 6 seals. You've got things. I just broke down 30 points here quickly that I'll just look right through that I pulled out from probably about 60 sentences. It speaks of a great red dragon. This is Revelation 12, descending with a tail. Also, Revelation 12, thundering, lightning, a darkening of the sky, cinders, fires, and stones falling. That's at the first trump. Oceans pouring out on land. That's also in the prophets. You got a burning of men by fire. This is a primary facet of the end times. It's the form that the judgment comes in to eradicate the sinners from the earth. Unrepentant. You've got a tearing open of the earth. You've got a red dust forming in the atmosphere, a crashing of rocks to the earth, a few survivors, men hiding in mountains, terror, earthquakes, the earth being moved from its very foundations. This is the pole shift in Isaiah 24. You've got a drastic alteration of landscape, mighty winds, soars upon men. It speaks of its mouth actually being an abyss. You've got hail falling to the earth, the destruction of the trees, melting of mountains, also a very specific terminology to the day of the Lord in the prophets. The bloodying of waters, a vile contamination of the waters, destruction of all the grass, great swarms of locusts. You've got a total blackness, a destruction of ships, and another one, the earth spewing up the dead and the embalmed being revealed to all, a halting of the grinds and a great moral degeneracy. I mean, I could have even kept going with that, and I pulled that out of literally like about 40 or 50 sentences of a prophetic chapter in this book. So basically, what I've read in this book is it's the day of the Lord, but it explains the physics or a possibility of the physics behind it as being this great planet passing, and it also parallels implicitly the Exodus judgment. What happened there? So I'm not saying it's divinely inspired, but it is extremely interesting, and the more that I look at the incursion prophecies and the physics behind the judgments, of the final days, it really seems to be the only viable answer. It seems to be sort of something that's mentioned in the Word a lot without specifically referring it to the planet, aside from once in Isaiah 13.
Kev, I'm going to give you a moment to comment here because I'm still having problems with this particular document, and I apologize.
That's not a problem, Brother Z. Folks, when it comes to the question of this Planet X or this Nibiru, I think it's incumbent upon people to remember where the word Nibiru came from. It comes from the Sumerian cuneiform stone tablets and writings that are probably 6,000 years old. And the term Nibiru means planet of the crossing. And as far as the Sumerian culture is concerned, I guess you could say it was the first recorded civilization on Earth after a flood, then called Sumerian, which is in today's Iraq. But when it comes to how people are tying this planet as far as to wormwood in the scriptures, I was very interested by it and all the hype that's on the internet about it. But in the revelation of Christ given to John, we find that most intriguing prophecy often used to suggest that some kind of heavenly body will crash into the earth and do great damage. The prophecy describes this as a great star named wormwood, and when we examine this concept in light of biblical support, and I'll read Revelation 8, verses 10 and 11 real quick. And a third angel sounded, and there fell a great star from heaven, burning as it were a lamp. And it fell upon the third part of the rivers, and upon the fountains of waters. And the name of the star is called wormwood. And many died of the waters because they were made bitter. So we see in that article, in that scripture, we primarily use scripture here in strict adherence to biblical, animation, that the Bible should interpret itself. And I think our challenge is in understanding John's vision and defining what these terms and images mean. If we were to ascribe purely to the literal physical meaning of these, then we accept that a huge star burning brightly will crash into our planet, but somehow the Earth will not be destroyed. It will mysteriously manage to fall on only the rivers and aquifers, fully 1/3 of them, which are scattered widely, across the globe. And no one will die from what would be a cataclysmic impact, but rather from the water which is poisoned and made bitter from the stars. So now when you consider the physical interpretation of these things, we are confronted with events which violate the laws of our Creator God has set in motion in the universe. If we, on the other hand, cling to the strictly literal interpretation, but then justify our position by suggesting that God will violate his own laws to miraculously bring forth this to fulfillment, then aren't we departing from the literal physical understanding anyway and taking that position, I think? It's clear that it would violate the principle of biblical integrity and the consistency upon which the soundness of the Scripture is based.
How does it violate the integrity?
I think because it's an important and powerful message Christ has given to John. And when you search the Scriptures...
No, I'm talking about the planet.
Because if a planet was to impact the Earth, Brother Z and Brother Allen, it would destroy our planet. We know that.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean? And God never said that he was going to destroy our planet. And
right.
So I think it plays into, and here again, it plays into that 90-10 part of 90% truth and 10% lie that we see Hollywood portraying, that there's going to be this rogue planet or asteroid hitting hitting the Earth, and you see movies made about this to really to scare us and to and I think that the Illuminati, because they worship a different God, they kind of believe this, and that's why they build these great underground bases to hide in, and the Scriptures tell us about it.
And let me interject here for just a second,
yeah.
Kevin. As far as the planet Nibiru, I never said that this planet was ever going to impact the Earth.
Oh,
and
I know that.
And also, as far as this Kolbrin Bible, which thank God I was able to retain the document, and we're going to go into it now. The Kolbrin Bible doesn't describe this called the destroyer, and I'm not even saying that it's Nibiru. All I'm saying is that something is described, and I'm not saying it's wormwood either, but something in the Kolbrin Bible. Hold on. Something in the Kolbrin Bible is described as the destroyer, and that it talks about it coming close to the Earth and crossing the sky, but it doesn't say that it impacts it. But we're going to go ahead and go into this because we got an hour remaining, and I need to cover a lot of territory. So this is from the destruction and the recreation. This is the Kolbrin Bible. It is known, and the story comes down from ancient times, that there was not one creation but two, a creation and a recreation. It is a fact known to the wise that the earth was utterly destroyed once and then reborn on a second wheel of creation. At the time of the great destruction of earth, God caused a dragon from out of heaven to come and encompass her about. The dragon was frightful to behold. It lashed its tail. It breathed out fire and hot coals, and a great catastrophe was inflicted upon mankind. The body of the dragon was wreathed in a cold, bright light, and beneath on the belly was a ruddy, hued glow, while behind it trailed a flowing tail of smoke, and it spewed out cinders and hot stones, and its breath was foul and stenchful, poisoning the nostrils of men. Its passages caused great thunderings and lightnings to rend the thick, darkened sky, all heaven and earth being made hot. The seas were loosed from their cradles and rose up, pouring across the land. There was an awful shrilling, trumpeting, which outpowered even the howling of the unleashed winds. Men, stricken with terror, went mad at the awful sight in the heavens. They were loosed from their senses and dashed about, crazed, not knowing what they did. The breath was sucked from their bodies, and they were burnt with a strange ash. And then it passed, leaving earth enwrapped within a dark and glowing mantle, which was ruddily lit up inside. The bowels of the earth were torn open in great rising upheavals, and a howling whirlwind rent the mountains apart. The wrath of the sky monster was loosed in the heavens. It lashed about in flaming fury, roaring like 1,000 thunders. It poured